185.
Sorry. How did that even happen? How did you get to
I felt like I leaked, and here we are.
Where's he want to go to school? Is he want to be a dog?
He is wanting to be a vegetable in his room, and not giving he doesn't want to drive, he doesn't want to be a little birdie still in the house. He went to visit Florida Poly last week, I think he liked it, but I don't know, he wants to be in the house. But, you know, that required him to get out of the house. So,
You made that. Okay.
Unfortunately, we have.
Joy and family.
Yeah, I don't know. And they'll take her. Adeline, I think she's ready.
Thank you.
Ready to go.
I'm gonna try.
Let's get her earpiece.
Right.
She changes a lot.
Tell me the flavor secret.
She wants to on
I was on the,
Also, do something that's gonna make money.
He's doing the best I could.
But you still won't be on a dance video and
I
dance.
felt like,
I mean,
questions last time, which I was
yeah, that's right. How are yours?
in a fishing boat.
Oh, wow. So where's he going to like it? Okay.
I think we got an invite.
Oh, okay.
I've got some already lined up.
Some areas it does address, some areas.
Love that. It's perfect.
I just do your best and then the video.
Yeah.
Okay, good afternoon. How is everybody? Welcome to our second meeting of the Internal Audit Committee. So we have two presenters here today. One from RSM, which is going to give you an update on your current internal audits. And then also from Curtis Gray, who's going to give you an update on our audit of the internal accounts at our schools. They'll both present, you can answer any questions. And I think we also had on the agenda that we were going to look at proposed dates for the upcoming year, quarterly proposed dates. I believe Neola policy says quarterly. And then from there, any other questions or concerns or anything anybody wanted to add to the agenda or wanted to discuss at this time. So thank you, everybody, for being here. Do we need to go around and do introductions or?
And Ms. Jones will lead all that once we call the meeting to order as well.
Yes, yes. Would we like to do introductions or?
That's number 2 on the agenda.
Okay, all right.
So perfect, we'll get the
Okay.
meeting called to order.
All right.
Ms. Jones?
Ms.
and then we'll
Jones,
get
you're in
into it.
charge.
Okay, it is Thursday, November 20th at 2:03 p.m. and I'm calling our Internal Audit Committee meeting to order. So we'll get started with agenda item number 2, welcome and introductions. We'll just go.
School Board Attorney John Steinmetz. We can move on to District 1.
Jeff Nettles, District 1.
Shantoya Jones, District 2.
Teresa Harrington, District 3.
Kelly Renfro, District 4.
Paul Busey, District 5. Superintendent David Green.
Chief of Staff Kelly Watt.
Dawn Posey, Business Affairs.
Alternate Joseph Bryan.
Kyle Seymour, Business Affairs.
All right, did everyone get a chance to look over the minutes from our April 17th meeting? Can I get a motion to approve?
Motion.
Anyone want a second?
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
All opposed? So approved unanimously. Item number 4, presentation from Purvis Gray, our internal accounts audit.
We're getting it pulled up.
Well, we don't have slides.
Okay.
We got a page turner. Are you? I don't see those. Yep.
Good.
No, so So we do have, you should all have a physical bound copy in front of you. 60 plus pages, we'll be going through in minute detail. It should take the rest of the 2 hours or 3 hours of the rest of your meeting. Excited for that. We will be turning some pages though, but we'll be focusing on the highlight, primarily the results of the audit as well as some of the key findings that we found during the course of the audit. Happy to present the internal accounts audit for Clay County District School Board for the year ending June 30th, 2025. If you go ahead and turn to page 1 in the bound financial statement, that first page should be the independent auditor's report on page 1. So in the internal auditor's report, you'll see a lot of language. Primarily, it focuses on what the responsibility is of management. It's management's responsibility for the preparation and fair presentation of the financial statements. It's our responsibility as auditors to issue an opinion on those financial statements that they are fairly presented in all material respects based off the audit procedures that we performed as part of our audit engagement. So if you see there on the second paragraph on that page, in our opinion, the financial statements in all material respects are fairly presented. That is a clean opinion. It's an unmodified opinion. It's the highest level of assurance that we can provide as part of an attestation engagement for a financial audit. Turning the page on that, past that actually, I'm going to move on to that's the rest of the report goes through page 3. On page 4, you'll find the balance sheet for the internal accounts. Not a whole lot going on and showing there. The cash and cash equivalents balance, however, inside that balance, there's $3.1 million that's actually cash with financial institutions. Another roughly $1.7 million is considered cash equivalents that's with your investment in Florida Prime. And that's your balance sheet. On the next page, you'll see the statement of revenues, expenditures, and changes in fund balance. Revenues at the top there of $11 million. That is up roughly 6% over the previous year. A large portion of that is related to additional fundraisings and contributions. 3 of the high schools had over a $100,000 increase in revenues in the current year. Main factors related to increase in some of the field trips and fundraising, as well as likewise with the revenues increasing about 6% in the current year. Expenditures also increased a little bit over 6% in the current year. Again, those same 3 high schools that had increase in revenues also had substantial increases in expenditures related to chair camp, cheer uniforms, as well as grad bash and other field trips, all those items. But a 6% swing year over year is not usually unheard of and is not outside the norm. Following this page, from pages 6, starting on page 6 is the notes to the financial statements. That first note, note 1, is the summary of significant accounting policies. This has a lot of information related to the reporting entity, what some of the line items as presented and what they include in the financial statements, estimates that are used by management. All that information can be found in note 1 of the financial statements. A lot of this is required disclosure for any GAAP compliant financial statements to include in note 1 of your financial statements. The next note, note 2 and note 3. Note 2, a few pages down after you get through note 1 on page 8. Note 1, cash deposits with financial institutions, custodial credit risk. This is required disclosure essentially anytime you have large balances of cash in a single bank account. FDIC only insures up to a set $250,000 in a single institution per depositor. So that's kind of what that disclosure discusses. And the next note 3 is your investment disclosures, and these are GASB 40 primarily disclosures related to investments, discusses the ratings and the RAMs, and all that is pertaining to the portion of the internal accounts that's in Florida Prime. Following that, additional risk after that. Following that on page 11, I believe, you'll see supplementary information on page 11, schedule of changes in fund balance. This is a supplementary information, so it's not required under the accounting standards to be presented along with the financial statements, but essentially this shows the school's balances in a cash basis from the beginning of the year to the end of the year. So if you total all that, total up there on that page of the 4.9, that totals back to your balance sheet for your cash portions of all those individual schools. Since this isn't required supplementary information, we don't necessarily audit this information. However, we do issue an in relation to opinion in which we actually do perform some basic procedures to ensure that these balances are in agreement with the financial statements that are audited. Following that on page 12, independent auditor's report on internal control over financial reporting and compliance. As part of a governmental audit, we are required to look at the internal controls over financial reporting in compliance. We do that review of your internal controls, not necessarily to test, and we're not required to test the effectiveness of the internal controls, but we do review the internal controls as it relates to the financial audit when we're performing those procedures. So if we have any specific items to bring to your attention that are internal control deficiencies that we noted during the audit, they are included in this report. This report does discuss what a deficiency in internal control is, and it kind of breaks it down. There's two different types of internal control deficiencies. There's a material weakness, and this is an internal control if not in place, it would likely result in a material misstatement not being detected. If those controls are not in place, that's a material weakness. A significant deficiency is a breakdown in internal controls that is less severe than a material weakness. They may just be breakdowns in internal control, but if they're not in place and they break down, don't necessarily likely result in a material misstatement from occurring. We do have a significant deficiency comment that will be found on the second page of that report, segregation of duties. And this is actually a comment that we've had in the past, and a large portion of this really pertains to the operation and setup of internal accounts at the school district. But essentially, anytime you have a segregation duty where a single individual is solely responsible and oversees any direct accounting functions, that's included. That's considered a segregation of duties. During our testing, we did note situations in which the bookkeepers were the sole individuals that were overseeing certain accounting functions. I will say that is not what your internal policies actually designate. It's not what's in the red book. There are specific policies in place to not have that. However, there were breakdowns in some instances that we noticed during our testing, which the bookkeeper basically was the initial recipient of cash directly, or there was not any documentation of any approval for disbursements by a secondary individual during their review, which if that was in place as the policies substantiate, then that would have been a finding and wouldn't result in segregation of duties. So you see on that page, I believe, I got a draft copy, should be management's responses related to that finding. And they are currently trying to address this by updating the internal accounts manual, as well as strengthening their training and controls and direction and conversations that they're having with the bookkeeper to help support them, to ensure that these processes that are in place are actually being followed, which should alleviate this deficiency. Following that, you'll have a management letter on page 15. And if you kind of just skim down to the end, towards the end of that page, the second to last paragraph, during the audit, we became aware of certain matters that represent opportunities for strengthening internal controls and improving operational efficiency. Our comments related to these matters are on page 16 through 64. It's a little bit different format than what's been issued in the past. In the past, we performed the audit. We had various findings that we'd have. We would relay those with the individual schools and the principals, and they would respond to their findings individually. What made it into our audit reports in the past was more of summarized type repeated findings overall for the internal accounts. This year, though, it's actually broken out by school, so you'll actually see the individual comments at each school, and that's what's on pages 16 through 64. And that, I'm not going to go through each of one of those findings, but I will like to give you some highlights on some of the items that are reoccurring and give you some statistics on those. There's really three primary findings that are prevalent during the course of this engagement that we noted. The first one's fundraising issues, and this pertains to fundraisers either occurring prior to any approval by the principals, so the start date of the fundraiser occurred before any type of approval was given. Also, there may not be the recap that's submitted at the end of the fundraiser that's required and reviewed within a timely manner at the end of the fundraiser. Those are the primary issues related to the fundraising. And out of all the schools that we visited, this accounts for 20 of the findings that we had during the current year. So almost half of the schools that we visited had a related finding related to fundraising issues. Of those 20 finding schools that had this finding, 5 of them are repeat findings from the previous year, meaning that they had some sort of finding in the prior year related to fundraising, and they occurred again in the current year. The next prevalent findings that you'll find is cash handling and timely deposit of cash. The DOE Red Book requires that any cash that is received at the school be remitted to the office within 24 hours, and then that deposit be made within 5 working days to the bank. Also, it requires receipts or any type of support to substantiate the deposit as well related to that. So any findings related to that would kind of relate to this cash handling and timely deposit. Out of the schools that we visited, 9 of the schools had a finding related to this, and 3 of those are repeat issues that have had these issues in the past as well. So if you do look at those individual ones, when you see the individual findings, you'll see what the finding was in the first column, what the finding is in the first column. The second column will just state if it's a repeat or not, yes or no, and if it's a yes, there'll be more context on what that finding was in the previous year. And then the third column is more support of why it's this finding. So it's either going to primarily reference general accounting standards, but it usually is going to reference the internal accounts handbook and where that's noted that it's a violation, or DOE's Chapter 8 of the Red Book. So it'll reference why that's exactly a finding. And then the principals or the designees' responses related to those findings. So that's kind of how those look. The last finding that's prevalent that we see a lot of it involves missing support and documentation. A lot of times this will be purchase orders. Again, the signature of the principal may be missing, or the PO itself may not be missing. So anytime we're unable to substantiate any support in secondary review, that's kind of a missing documentation related to those findings, as well as any type of like P card transactions. Maybe there's not support related to the P card transactions as well. So that kind of rounds up the primary findings that we had. Just kind of high overview of all those type of findings. But if anybody does have any questions on any particular findings or concerns or anything that we can help answer related to the audit, I'd be happy to address those.
Did you have a number count for how many were missing support documentation findings?
Probably did.
I was just wondering, since you had it.
So I have some more detail, but I don't have, so receipts missing, 3 POs, which would be related to that, is 3 budgets and transfers. There was 3 of those each as well. But budgets and transfers, we're usually when they're going to have some sort of support documentation that's missing. Anytime the bookkeeper is doing a transfer or journal entry, the principal should be reviewing those entries that are made and documenting their support and their review of it. In a lot of these cases, the principal is the secondary reviewer to ensure that this is not breakdown instead of a single person being involved. So a lot of the journal, there's only 3 of the journal entries and transfers we reviewed, they were missing the principal's signature altogether. We didn't have, there's been a slight decrease over the years. We used to have, so when we go out to we visit every single school in person and perform various testing, we look at a lot of receipts, disbursements, P cards, making general inquiries and internal controls. We have a questionnaire that we provide to them that they respond to that might result in some issues. Look at any ticket sales that they may have, and that's the one that's kind of decreased over the years. Used to have a lot of ticket sales related type issues, but a lot of entities, some places are going away from cash-based and actual physical tickets and going to electronic means, which does kind of help alleviate some of that potential risk. But ticket sales, a lot of times they would be recalculated, so they would have to say what the ticket roll began and ended on, so what's that difference times the dollar value, and if that doesn't agree to the amount that's being deposited, that was an issue. That's kind of decreased over the years with some entities kind of switching away from the cash-based use of those.
Madam Chair, if I could, I would just say I appreciate the format, naming the school and the format, because then you can retraining more apparent than when you combine the results and like you know where you need to go and who you need to speak to.
I agree.
Yeah, in this formatting that we do have, it's just now in the report, so it does make it a lot easier for everybody to be aware of the finding. In the past, while we're out on the site and we kind of complete most of our testing, we'll have a brief exit with the bookkeepers and the principals on site just so they're aware of what we saw. And sometimes they may have some specific information they want to provide related to that. So once those visits are done, they have a little soft exit in the field then all the work papers are obtained and reviewed internally by a second individual, and then we actually issue and send an email related to these findings to the principals and bookkeepers. And we've always done that, and it's basically the format that you now see, but they would return that to us, and management would have it as well, but it never made it into our report the way it was presented. We always just summarized in the past. But this format is actually, there's a lot of other school districts that use this format. It's not necessarily required, but it does make it a little easier so everybody's on board to see what the individual findings are. And hopefully the bookkeepers and the principals also, now that they know that those are the specific items, they can kind of help address those items in the future. I think sometimes it's hard. They'll look at these findings and just try to justify, well, this occurred and this occurred. And I completely understand those things happen, but if that kind of becomes the norm when you're looking at what these controls are, and you're just kind of like, yeah, it's this reason and stuff, that's when you end up rising to issues and things end up in the public and things go wrong. So it's best if you can just try to have strengthening the controls and make sure that everybody's on the same page to support those controls that are in place.
So as Matt said, a lot of other school districts already do this and put them into the report, and that's how it was at St. John's. So when we came here, Matt and I had a conversation about this. So, because I could never, the Excel document, like Matt said, was being done, but it wasn't, just.
Didn't get out there into the reports,
Yeah,
didn't out to the public
What
necessarily.
relate to their area and what they were doing. And this kind of helps them, the school, see it and hold them accountable for it and help them realize what's going on at their school. So, yeah.
Is there a procedure for follow-up on these things by the school board?
I think the challenge is, right, let's say the finding about not having the proper documentation for starting a fundraiser. So picture people in a PFA meeting, they say, okay, we're gonna do this fundraiser. And everybody at the meeting agrees, but nobody fills out the form. And then the dates don't match when they do their testing. It becomes a finding thing. So it's a matter of good people knowing that the paperwork and the documentation are paramount to the process,
Sure. Just if I could chime in, spoke with Ms. Posey a lot about plans going into the future and that management response that's in there. We do feel that, there is some fresh look that's being taken at the processes and the training aspect and all of that, as well as bringing some more centralized aspects to it, and I think that will help a lot. Sort of a crystal ball prediction, but the plans that sound like are being put in place by the superintendent and business affairs, I think will, just through those efforts, will reduce the findings going into the future. I think actions are being taken. I don't think it's just being, sort of pushed aside into the future. So I appreciate the plans that sound like they're being put in place.
Can you, I think you already did this once, but I was reading and listening all at the same time. Can you recap the most common mistakes one more time?
Sure. The largest one is fundraising related issues. So again, that's the fundraiser occurring starting before the approval date. So there's a form that has to be completed that a fundraiser is going to be undertaken. The principal and bookkeeper sign off on that. The other part of anything that's a fundraising issue is that has a recap, basically where you calculate what the revenue and expenses related were to the fundraiser, and it has supposed to be filed and approved within 30 days at the end of the fundraiser. So those type of things were missing, and I think it was 20 of those schools basically had a finding related to that, and 5 of those were repeat findings. So they had that finding, related finding to fundraisers in the prior year and again in the current year. And then cash handling and deposit timeliness. The DOE Red Book that kind of oversees what you can and can't do necessarily with internal accounts. Your internal handbook kind of has additional controls and additional information that kind of may, kind of be less than that, but the Red Book requires the deposit to be deposited to the office, get into the office within 24 hours and deposited into a bank within 5 business days. And there were nine findings related to that, 3 of them being repeats. And the other thing is usually just missing documentation. I think there's about 6 of those total, but that kind of goes from P card documentation missing. Like we weren't able to complete the testing to say that the dates weren't necessarily completed because when we requested documentation, it was completely missing. So those were also findings. So that was kind of the third one that we had a lot of.
May I ask a question?
Yes.
Maybe it's just me because I haven't been on this board until this time, so it's new for me. Of the revenues that are listed here, what percentage of those would be in this bucket that we're talking about fundraising? I mean, is that a big percentage? Is it most of it, or is it a small percentage?
It's probably not the significant amount, I guess, I don't really have that data with me, to be honest with you. A lot of it is collection of like field trips, fundraisers, it's club accounts essentially.
Right.
So the club's doing anything, type of collection, selling something, has an event that they're going on, they collect the revenues related to that.
Yeah, I've done not-for-profit, but I haven't done any school related. So I didn't know what percentage of this revenue would be represented by fundraising versus what other kind of revenue streams do they have besides the fundraising, the big ones?
Your largest is probably your football gate.
Can you believe that?
That's typically, we don't have the statistics particularly on yours, but generally speaking, your athletics, your gate fees being the largest. But flowing through there, all the trips, and depending upon what schools are doing what trips, can be a very significant component. I would say that's probably category 2. Heading in, down from there, you get into your yearbook fees can be significant at your high school levels particularly. Moving further down, you get into smaller realms of just the general fundraisers, the smaller activities that are going on, club fees.
So would you believe that these findings primarily relate to those smaller fundraising accounts, or maybe, a few $100s or a few $1,000s?
I would say thousands. I mean, across the district, you're talking thousands.
At the school level?
Right, that would vary. I mean, at an elementary school, it could be a significant component of an elementary school. From a high school, it's outsized by ticket sales, gate ticket sales, so it's a smaller component. But still thousands in a year, Couldn't articulate the particulars. It's not broken down in that detail.
And that's an internal control that's basically an efficiency over fundraising. It's not that the dollars are missing or not in there, so it's not an odd adjustment that necessarily that the revenue's not properly recorded. It's the controls behind that are being reviewed to help substantiate that number. Those items were not followed.
Well, you don't know your population.
Yeah, no. Well, that's the thing.
In a periodic term, you don't have a real population supposedly. That's why it makes it more difficult to know what that number is.
Right, no, exactly. And in some of these findings, all the fundraisers may not have it necessarily, but a lot of the findings, if there was a specific amount that there was a violation, those will be listed in there. And they may seem like small, and I get that. They do seem small in the grand scheme maybe of things. But these are breakdown of the controls, and then when they repeat is when this kind of stuff ends up breaking down, and that's when stuff ends up in the news.
So, but you're gonna wait, it'll be another year before they get reviewed again, right?
But for the financial audit, it's just annual as of 6/30 each year. Y'all do have an internal accounts coordinator that does some training and stuff, and some follow-up when new questions arise.
Right, that's one of the concepts that you need to keep in mind is we are auditing the district-wide, not the individual school. And so we're looking for those systemic problems that is the district not have control over what's out there. And so from that sampling basis, we're following, we will revisit the school next year and apply those district-wide audit procedures. But the district between now and then is the one who will be needing to follow up on a shorter basis. And I do think that the training and plans that are being put in place to centralize more of the accounting function will help in catching some of that.
So to kind of add clarification to this, certainly if you have a coordinator of internal accounts, which is a person that does routine, although not officially auditing, that looks behind to make sure and there's constant communication, because this is a daily event with many transactions every day across the district. So somebody does check on the daily work, and this is more of the big broad picture of the entire district and controls the revenues.
And if I may, I would add to that, effective July 1, internal accounts came into Business Plus, which is the district's ERP system. And so part of that process is a workflow that, you now do POs in the system when your prior approval would be a purchase requisition, and all that is now documented within the system. So we're able to, and the auditors are able to look at that and get into the workflow and see that. And we also, that would be new for them to be into our system. And we also, through the system, approve here at the district level in our internal accounts area, we also approve all journal entries. So the POs were included in the significant finding number 2 that you were talking about, not having support. Well, that's going to be really difficult now for them not to have that. They're in the system, they have to have all that. It's the only way it'll go through the workflow. And the other thing with the journal entries, all their journal entries that they do at each school are reviewed here at the district and checked beforehand. So if there's like a, you know, if you have the wrong object code, or if you have the wrong revenue, or you've got revenue going to an expense object code or the other way, we'll catch that here and they get to fix it and then it goes forward. So we have these controls in place that are proactive to help them from getting into situations. Does that make sense? Yeah. I just thought I'd throw that out there.
Well, I mean, I'm happy to answer any questions, but if any questions do ever come up, you can always feel free to reach out to us throughout the year. We'll be always happy to respond and answer any questions that anybody may have.
Thank you.
Thank you.
We've got agenda item number 5, update from RSM on cybersecurity and contract review.
Good afternoon. Thanks for having us again today. What we've got on the screen is our first official monthly project dashboard. So you all should have received this in your email on the 14th, which I think was last Friday. Did anybody not receive it? Did not receive it? Okay, we can connect afterwards, make sure we have your email, make sure that you're on the list there to get it going forward. But what this is it's a monthly update that we provide to the committee here as well as to the board that basically provides exactly what it sounds like, an update on the ongoing projects that we have right now. So our intention will be to provide this the second Friday of every month, starting last week and going forward until we complete both of these projects and then present them to the committee here and to the board. And then once they drop, they'll drop off, and then in the next year's audit plan, we'll create a new dashboard to update on those audits as they're ongoing. And so you will start to see these every month. Obviously, if you have any questions, it'll either probably come from me or Weiss or one of our supervisors, Jack Hughes. Just reach out if you have any questions about anything that's ever on the dashboard. So we'll go through this just verbally with you today since we're here, and we'll talk about it. So the two, if you guys will recall, at the last audit committee meeting, this committee approved and recommended to the board to bring the two audits that are here, contract compliance and internal and external penetration testing, cybersecurity testing. So the board at their next meeting approved that, and then we executed the statements of work with the scope and have begun testing starting basically, and we had I think our first kickoff meeting in like the August-September timeframe, but we were really waiting until school got started and the chaos of the new school year settled down before we really started to come in and bother too much. But where we are right now is contract compliance was one of the ones that we selected. If you'll recall, when we talk about contract compliance at the district, at a district, any school district, many contracts are all throughout the district, lots of different departments. Generally, even though the purchasing function is going to be a centralized process, the actual administration of contracts is going to be out at perhaps different schools or different departments, and so it's a decentralized function. And so what we do for that is we sample some high-risk contracts. Weiss will talk a little bit more about how we do that and kind of where we are on that right now, but we sample high-risk contracts and we look at the controls of how is the district, the different departments, the different individuals that are responsible for monitoring these agreements, how are they doing? Are they reviewing the invoices? Do the invoices have an appropriate level of detail based on the services that are outlined in the agreement? If there are any change events, how are those being dealt with? Again, are they in compliance with the agreement? Making sure that the controls are good and in place at various departments and kind of across the district. So that's the approach we take to doing that. So we did sample 5 contracts of different types, services, goods across several different departments, and we're just now getting into field work on that one. We had a couple discussions about sampling. I won't go too much into that because Weiss is going to talk about that, but we're just now getting into field work on that one. On the cybersecurity, internal and external penetration testing. That's not done by me, thankfully, but we have cybersecurity folks that work at RSM. What they do is it's really a 2-part test. So the first one is external penetration testing. So our penetration testers, white hat hackers, are they able to compromise the district's environment in any type of way from the outside. So they might do some searching on the internet to see if there's anything that's been posted on, the dark web. They might try multiple different ways of getting into the system to see if they're able to get in. And if they are, they'll provide those. I'll go over the process in a minute. But they basically, if they do find vulnerabilities, that's communicated and then discussed, and then there are remediation recommendations for the district to consider if there are any vulnerabilities there. The other piece of that is internal penetration testing. So that kind of assumes that once an actor, a bad actor, has gotten into the system, or even if it's just somebody like a student or an employee that already has access into the system through legitimate means or even possibly illegitimate means, how can they jump from one area to the next? Because obviously that's an important thing. Generally with cyber, you want things compartmentalized so that if you get into the email system, you can't then jump over to the student information system and get a bunch of confidential data out of there. And so what they do is they kind of start out with the running like a lead, and then they see, okay, if once we did get in, are we able to then move throughout other parts of the district's environment? And then if they are, again, if there are any vulnerabilities identified, that's discussed with management, and remediation plans and recommendations are provided to management. Obviously, for the sake of security, I'll talk just briefly about reporting there. That's a confidential report. I mean, that's never anything that we would want in the public. So what we typically do is we'll work with the board attorney to make sure that everything's buttoned up officially. But what we typically do is we issue a letter that basically says, pursuant to the statutes that relate to the Sunshine Law, this is confidential and it's not something that's going to be shared publicly, but we did this work, we discussed it with management, period. And that's really the only thing that becomes the public-facing document. There is a full report that gets discussed with management. We'll work with the board to determine how much, it's really up to the board's discretion, how much of that report is presented to the committee here, and when and how that happens. We have to work with the board our liaison there, Ms. Hanson, to kind of really determine how to proceed with what we present to the committee. But if we do, what that typically looks like, either the committee or the board or both, it's a shade session, so we would go into closed session. Generally, to keep in line with statutes, minutes have to be taken, but they're never public. And then, that's where we would hand out hard copies of the report. They'd be numbered, and we'd collect the hard copies back so that nobody can leave with them, that sort of thing, just to make sure that security is as tight as possible on that. But that's kind of what the reporting process would look like. For that one, we've done our work and we are in reporting. And so right now, it's going through our internal QA/QC process, and shortly we'll be meeting with the district management and the superintendent to discuss the results, vet everything, make sure that we didn't, misrepresent anything or make sure that it's accurate. But that's just a high-level update. Like I said, you'll be receiving these dashboards monthly. If you have any questions, please reach out. We're certainly happy to discuss anything that you might want to talk about. But I'll let Weiss kind of get into the details of both of them.
Perfect. Yeah, to add a little bit more context, starting with contract compliance. So this is a very subjective approach that we take. It's a judgmental sample, and that's very intentional, and that's the approach we take for all of our internal audits, right? The goal is to sample inherently high-risk areas, in this case, contracts. So the first step we take, and you'll see that noted here, is we do data analytics on contract spend by vendor. That helps us get an idea of where, from a materiality perspective, the spend is going. From there, that helps us facilitate conversations with management. So that allows us to get perspective from management. In this case, we met with your superintendent as well as some other leaders to understand, are there any inherently high-risk contracts that you're aware of? Maybe you've you've experienced issues with the vendor from whatever perspective, so that we can consider that as we go into our sampling approach. As Matt alluded to, we did select 5 contracts. So what we'll be doing when we sample those contracts is actually look at every provision of those contracts to make sure service level agreements are being met. Any responsibilities on the vendor side are being fully executed to the expectations of the district. Then, of course, any responsibilities on the district end, we're making sure that those invoices are being paid timely, things like that as well. We're in the process of, we've disseminated those requests, and now we're just waiting for the actual support, and then we'll be able to start our testing and hopefully expedite that review pretty quickly. The internal and external penetration testing, as Matt alluded to, that's a simulated attack, so that's our ethical hackers is what we described. They've gone in, they've done their due diligence, working with management to execute that last month. So we are in the process of getting that report pulled together and hoping to have, we've already distributed the preliminary results so that we can begin those conversations on what opportunities may or may not exist. And we'll be executing hopefully an exit meeting here soon with Dwayne to talk through any concerns or questions he might have around that. So both of them are moving pretty quickly, and as Matt said, here to answer any questions you might have.
Yeah, and we would expect, just for your benefit, I know you're setting your meetings, I think, next year today. Depending on when that is, I would imagine, penetration testing will definitely be done by then, whenever the next meeting is, because we're pretty much done now. I would imagine that contract compliance will probably be done, unless your meeting is in early January. So, depends on when you guys set the meeting, but in theory, we should be, at the next audit committee meeting, should be able to bring both of those reports and to complete the audit plan for the year. All right, any questions?
So you're saying that by February-ish, because, one of the challenges, if I could, Madam Chair, is establishing the dates. You want to make sure you have something of meat to do when you get to the meeting, right? So when would you think that would be possible to set a meeting, because we would have the meeting?
Yeah, so I know we've been working with procurement to get the contracts. I know I saw emails this week, so I believe we have everything we need there, so we should be able to set up walkthroughs with the different departments that own those contracts. I would imagine we should be able to have those completed before the holidays, before Christmas, and then could complete our testing in January and probably be into reporting in February. And by the time we're done, so the way that our reporting process works is, obviously we go through our process. We're in communication with management the entire time to make sure that we're not missing anything or misinterpreting something, and we have everything that we think we are supposed to have, and we try to do that vetting process in real time. And then once we feel comfortable that we've done that, we will go to writing the report, and it's a draft report, and then we have an exit meeting with the department level to say, hey, here's where we are with the report, here's recommendations we have. And we take their feedback. If they think, no, you didn't ask about this, and here's this one thing that actually impacts that, or no, we agree with that, whatever, and then we kind of talk through that with them. Then we schedule a meeting with the superintendent and any other, if he wants to invite cabinet, whoever else, to discuss the report with him. Once everybody's happy that management's response, that everything's accurate, management's responses have addressed the issues effectively, and set a date for remediation, then it becomes a final report, and then that's when we bring it to the audit committee. So it does take some time. I don't know.
And that's intentional, right? Because before it becomes public, we want to make sure everything is complete and accurate, and that everyone's on the same page. Management action plans are another component of our report. So sometimes we'll go through the exercise you just described, where we hold our exit meetings, and then it takes time for management to get their responses. So what actions are you going to take to address these risks? Sometimes that can take time. So to answer your question, I think certainly penetration testing will be completed, but whether or not we're communicating that will be, I think, to be determined. So we may find a later date is better, just to make sure we have a fuller agenda to discuss everything.
Yeah, we would definitely be done, I would think, with that by March.
Yeah.
If you have an early meeting in early March, I'd have no problem doing that. I think if we're in February, that'd probably be when we would normally be having our vetting discussions with management, making sure that the report is tidy. If that helps you all in your decision making for that. But if not, and you have another one in Q2, we could still do it then too, because that would still be before the end of the fiscal year.
And normally we would try to stagger these reports so that there's at least one at each meeting, so that we have an opportunity to meet. That's ideal. This might be the unique scenario where it might benefit you to wait until both are complete.
Both the technology and the contract reports, is that what you're talking about?
Mm-hmm.
Okay.
Yeah. No matter when, if it's February, the technology one would definitely be done. I mean, we'll be 95% done with that before Christmas.
But then you also got to take it to the liaison of the board, right?
We will discuss with her how she wants, I don't know, how she or how the board decides they want to move forward with what we present to the committee, again, because of the sensitivity of it. But that's ultimately up to the board to decide.
Okay, Madam Chair, it's up to you.
Okay, thank you. Does anyone else have any questions? I have an slightly off-topic question, sorry. The ethical hackers, I know you, luckily it's not either of the two of you, are they, are they, and I'm asking for a personal reason, my brother's an ethical hacker and he will not go out on his own. So I'm just wondering if the ethical hackers are, like direct employees of you all, or do you generally contract with like an ethical hacking firm or
No,
something?
they're employees.
Okay.
Yeah, so we have, we're a large firm in all over the world.
Yes.
And we have a whole, I mean, probably hundreds of people, I don't know their exact size, but a large team of people whose entire job is to, I mean, they even have their own sub-teams. So they have people that only do hacking and they work overnight. And then we have people that do incident response. So if there is a big breach, they go and they collect things and help, remediate that issue in real time, and they get called out in the middle of the night all the time now. But they're actual employees of our firm.
And it takes it almost one step further. These are, the cybersecurity team works at the one that is specifically working on this engagement, works with school districts, exclusively with governments, because they're most familiar with the types of risks. So when it comes to recommendations and those conversations, they're not providing unrealistic, this isn't a Fortune 500 company, right, that's going to have the same type of challenges or resources, right? So that's another big benefit, I would say.
Cool, thank you.
Yeah.
All right. I think that we should move on to agenda item number 6, our future proposed meeting dates. So it looks like we have February, May, September, and December. Based on what we just heard, should we move February's to March?
It's up to the group, that seems like the recommendation.
Yeah, I was, Ms. Posey was sharing with me that these months worked with the calendar, I believe you said, right?
Yeah.
The current calendar,
Just
so.
if you wanted to be 3 months out.
Oh, okay.
Yeah,
Thought
if
you
you're
meant
going
scheduling
every 3
calendar.
months, yeah,
Okay,
yeah.
I see.
I mean, maybe in February, they might have one ready in February and then one ready in May. Is that kind of correct?
Yeah, we could do that, yeah, absolutely.
So you would have, because you also might have in February, and you also probably will have in February the audit from Purvis Gray on the district's financial statements too. So that one will be, that's kind of why I picked February to begin with, because I had Purvis Gray too. So they will have their audit. They did the audit of the internal accounts today, which is part of the big financial one, but the whole financial audit, our audit, the Single Audit Act, the federal awards, that will be ready in February. So that was just another thing to consider. So you could have a audit from Purvis Gray and an audit from RSM in February, and then possibly in May, the other audit, right?
Certainly by May, yeah.
I think that sounds good.
I think so too. Do we need to choose specific dates? Are we proposing dates for all of these now?
February.
I would think so.
February.
I think so.
To get on everybody's
Okay.
calendar, I think we should at least pick February at least.
And I think we had Thursdays,
Yes,
I think this is
absolutely.
our, I don't have the school calendar. I don't think we have
the school
anything.
calendar,
Okay.
So, we released it like a day of the week, like today is Thursday, so start our Thursdays best.
I think last time we decided Thursdays were best. I think the first one was on Thursday too.
So, Mr. Brodsky would be out, on the 19th, but we could do it the afternoon of the 26th, the morning of he has an event.
26th of February.
Yes, sir.
Yeah, we should be
Should be done by the afternoon. Afternoon should be clear, so like at 2 o'clock. On February 26th would be the recommendation from the superintendent's side.
I don't have any objections to that.
Whatever.
Okay.
As long as I'm
I'm sure you're not out of town or anything.
No, I'm not out of town, I'm with that.
It's the 26th.
Yep.
Everybody.
Book this room.
And this one was scheduled for, I think, an hour when it was sent. Is that about the amount of time each time?
I think it was scheduled for 2 hours.
Was it scheduled for 2?
Previously, it looks like this one is about an hour, so
Okay.
between that amount of time, it seemed rational to me.
So 2 to 3 approximately, and it could go a little later, just depending on the conversations.
Okay. Agenda item number 7, we have other business.
Minutes report with committee members.
That's just a general for
That's right.
everybody.
Anyone have anything?
I have nothing else.
No.
Then I guess we'll move on to adjournment.
Get a motion to adjourn.
Oh, sorry, motion to adjourn.
Second.
Oh, you need to.
Do I
you need
have a
first.
motion to
Oh,
adjourn?
first.
Second.
All right. All those in.
All those in favor?
Aye.
All those opposed? All right,
This meeting is adjourned.
this meeting is adjourned.
Also,
2:49. For your minutes, 2:49.
Question.
2:03, it's your email address. Start at 2:03.
I have a feeling it might be.
Yeah, you got a little bit, okay.
I think we have to.
All right, I will share with you all.
Yeah. And just remember, if one of the Purvis Gray or another entity sends the committee an email, only reply back to Purvis Gray and not the entire committee to comply with sunshine. You've got 3 emails, good enough. There we go.
Try not to mess that one up.
Right? They sent us all BCC.
I'll email you.
Alright, well, it's blocking it, okay.
I'm not at that.
No, I just wanted to try to type.
You're nerding out.
It was nice to meet you. Good job. Me too, thank you. I got adjournment now. I gotta get out of the.
I love it, great, that's an easy one to remember.
It's a silly one, I think, of the meeting. You know everybody's itching to
Right, like,
get on with
it
their
feels
day.
like, yes, I am in agreement. Okay. Okay, great.
Okay, that just tired me.
Yes.
That was a good one.
So I think that we need to, there's certain schools that they need to be recognized, like the two papers in here. Like,
Yeah, and then I think you got your email, right? Did we got it, have it right, or?
Yeah, I was telling him that the one